questions. Christophe will answer your question. Christophe, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So very happy to be here and delighted to be able to share our insights on talent management here at the HRcoreLAB. Of course, I would have loved to do this physically, and it looks like slowly we're going back to a situation where that might be possible in the future. So looking forward to meeting you in person again, Tom, in the future. So maybe you're wondering why I took this picture. It might not make any sense to you if you look at the topic of the presentation, but personally, I really do think it does. Because when I think about talent, more and more, I think we need to take into account actually the whole ecosystem around talent. It's not just about them at work. You need to take into account the life events that are currently very important to them, providing personalized solutions for each and every one of them, rather than the one size fits all or segmented solutions, which we have been presenting so long for so long time for the moment. So this also very nicely chimes actually with our bank's purpose statement, which you can also see here, which is empowering people to stay a step ahead in life and in business. So wouldn't it be great if we would actually also be able to achieve the same for all of our employees? So the slides moved, fantastic. So just maybe a short introduction about ING. Tom already said we're a bank. We actually see ourselves as the unbanky bank. We see ourselves more as a tech player who happens to have a banking license. You need to know that we are a Dutch bank, but we operate in more than 55 countries over the world, mainly in Europe. Yes, we are also active in Ukraine and in Russia, which is providing some kind of extra troubles for the moment. But we were actually always trying to innovate. That's why, for example, ING was one of the first banks to set up ATMs, but also to launch an app to come with new innovations that are changing banking as an institution. And also, like all other banks, before COVID, our business model has been under very heavy pressure, which actually forced us to completely rethink our business strategy, which is, like I said, to become a tech company with a banking license. And to facilitate that transition, ING decided a couple of years ago to change its way of working and to move fully into Agile since 2017. So actually, for the moment, we have 80% of our workforce who now works in an Agile way. So it means we're organized in squads, we have self-steering teams, we have tribes, we have chapters, and all of that you can read about when you read the Agile Manifesto. And as you can imagine, COVID also tested this agility and sped up actually the development of the way of working within our organization. But what is it now? What makes Agile working so different from everything else? Actually, the way I look at it is that you look at a normal way of working, what we had before, then you structure your organization into a pyramid. And you still see those pyramids coming back in many of the organigrams that are being shared around the world. This kind of organizations really were built to be reliable, to be efficient. Actually, in the Agile way of working, the idea is to go to a more organic network of clusters where you are primed for speed and agility and constant movement to match the need that is changing all the time. And as you can imagine, that kind of change, that kind of new environment has a huge impact on leadership because it really stretches them. They need to rethink how they look at the way oh, I'm on the wrong slide, I see now, sorry. Going back a couple of slides. Okay, sorry. So it has a big impact on leadership because they are really stretched and need to think about what it means for them and how they need to manage those self-steering teams. And many managers still are in the old command and control kind of mindset, which needs to change. But it's not only leadership, because we did, and I'm going back to that with the big impact on leadership development, but it actually impacts all of your HR processes. Because it translates more and more into the use of skills rather than functions to operate an organization. You see, we are talking more and more also in these conferences on skills-based organizations, which are completely turned around the way we operate and how we run processes as an HR function. Because we can't start from functions anymore. If you take a look at the old organizations, everything was centered around functions. You had a function for which you knew what the deliverables were. Those deliverables actually were translated into skills. For those skills, you would go outside and try to find people. You would you would take the functions, see what kind of deliverables were necessary, and based upon that, you would identify their salaries for those functions. You would identify what they needed to know, and then based upon that, you would actually translate that into learning paths. Same thing for performance, same thing for career management. But actually, in the future, that's not possible anymore because things are moving so rapidly all the time in that organic cluster of roles within an organization that everything needs to be brought back to the individual, to the skills of the individual and the ambitions of the individual, which is a very individual approach, of course. So that means, and then I can come to that slide, that means that actually we are all pioneers within HR. We are all experimenting all the time. There is no real textbook that has been written for this new environment and how to work in that and how to set up all of our HR processes. And actually, most agile companies that we all look up towards, like Spotify and others, they had the advantage that they started from scratch, which is, of course, very easy. As a company, as an established company, you need to take into account the existing organization. You need to take into account the legacy systems, the processes you already have, the behaviors, the culture, and everything like that. So it is a completely other way to switch to agile if you are in an organization that's already established. And of course, like for the real pioneers, the whole world around you looks like a very dangerous place. There can be bears everywhere or pitfalls or whatever, but it doesn't mean you need to be afraid. Think of all those great pioneers we had who actually went out there and found new territories. That's also the kind of mindset I think we need to have now as an HR, to be real pioneers and try to experiment and find new grounds. But for the employees, it also is a big difference. They're also kind of of pioneers, and they need a very stable anchor point. And before, that anchor point was provided by many of the companies. Many companies took actually the employees by the hand and made sure that they got an explanation of what they were expected to do in order to develop, to grow, to take the next role, the next position in the organization. But that's all changing because as a company, we actually also don't know where we are growing towards and what will be the next step they need to do. And looking at the past actually will not help us to get a good view on what will be necessary in the future, because the future will be completely different. So the stable anchor point needs to be brought back to the employee itself. And that's something we tried to do in setting up our new talent management approach. And again, I think the lockdown and the hybrid way of working seems to have accelerated this vision, this approach. Why else actually would we be increasing our efforts so much on mental well-being of our people, for example? We cannot create that environment for them anymore. They will actually need to start creating the environment for themselves as well. Okay. So next to this focus on well-being, in talent management, there's also a big link towards development, of course, and especially in the skills-based organization, this is key. Because if you're not growing, you will slowly start to die in the organization that is constantly on the moving. And actually growing a company, you need to do it by growing your people, because when they grow, automatically your company will be growing as well. And I needed to really bring a story to the rest of the organization to convince the whole of the organization that that was the way to look at it, and which is why I use this metaphor, this picture of the plant. And in the way I see it, actually the employee is the plant itself. And as a plant needs to grow, first of all, it grows, but it grows slowly. You cannot actually push development too much. Grass doesn't grow faster because you pull at it. You need to give it time to grow by itself. And of course, you can provide nutrition, you can provide sunlight, you can provide water. That's where you help them to grow faster. But the speed of growth is something really innate by the employee himself. And you could actually make that comparison as well. As you say, plants need more water. That means that also if you put too much water on a plant, it will drown. Same thing happens with development. You can give them a lot of access to developmental opportunities, but if you give too much, they will actually not see the possibilities anymore. They will have too much and they will actually not be focused anymore. So focus is really important. Give enough water to your plants, but not too much. Same thing for nutrition. Think about what kind of learning interventions you will actually provide to your employees, because all employees need different kinds of interventions, like different plants need different kinds of nutrition. In that metaphor, of course, it's not only the plant that has a role to play. The manager also has a role to play. And the manager in this metaphor is the gardener. The gardener who actually will identify what is the best place for that plant in the garden. Where does it have enough sunlight, for example? What kind of recognition does somebody need? What kind of plants go good together? What kind of plants don't you put together? And also weeding out the bad herbs, so wrong behavior, calling out wrong behavior and making sure that actually those are not staying in the garden is something that the manager needs to do. And then the question remains, what is then the role of HR? I think in this metaphor, the HR should be seen as the gardening store. We are the place where the gardeners and the plants will come to find the right kind of nutrition for them. They will get explanation and training on how to do it in the best possible way. We will sell them equipment and products that they will that enable them to create that magnificent garden that they're looking for. And actually, if there's a really big intervention needed, yeah, then we come with the big shovels and the bobcats and everything to actually redesign the garden if needed. But of course, the growing needs to have a direction, a focus, and that's why Agile needs to start with you. And that's where we come to the next picture, which is our self-driven talent management approach. So we really decided to say talent management needs to be driven by the employees. So the employees in the center, like I said, they are the anchor point. But in order to be the anchor point, they need to feel safe. They need to feel stable. And in order to do that, what is really important is they need to know who they are and what they want to stand for. So they need to know actually their own purpose, which is how this growth wheel starts at the top, is by discovering what is your own purpose. What do you want to be? Who are you currently? What do you aspire to? Next step, once you have identified that, is that you can start planning. You can actually try to translate what you have identified in your discovery to what this means in your current job, but also in your next job. How will it help you to move towards the next role? But even outside of ING, and that's also something we added into the mix to say, as a company, we actually are not able to ensure lifetime employment for you. So at a certain moment, you might decide that your time with ING is ending, or we might decide, because we also have some roles that are disappearing. So let's also make sure that our employees prepare for that moment in their life cycle. So that's the second phase, planning for it. And I'll come back to that later, how we do that. And then the third phase is actually taking action. You need to make sure that people start developing and taking developmental actions. That can be very broad, not only following trainings or e-learnings, but also taking on a new job, talking with other experts, linking with the mentors, things like that. So it's very broadly defined, actually. But that's only the first step. So it needs to be employee owned. They are in the driver's seat of their own development. Secondly, it needs to be manager supported. As I already said, they are the gardener helping the plants grow. And they need to make sure that that flywheel that you see continues to turn around at the right speed. Because if people start to rethink their purpose too fast and start taking actions too fast, or take too much of actions, the flywheel starts to go too fast and then it will fall apart. On the other hand, some people just don't kick into action. That's also where the manager needs to intervene and make sure that the flywheel starts to turn and that they are challenged and that they are coached to take all the necessary actions. So that's where you need to train your manager for those kind of coaching interventions. And then thirdly, it needs to be company enabled. You need to make sure that that flywheel can work in an environment where actually everything is available for them to do so. So you need to provide them insights coming from your hiring process. What kind of assessments have you done? What comes out of the testing of the interviews, and provide that information back to your employees. Things coming out of your performance management system, feedback that they are receiving, make sure it is incorporated in developmental actions. All kind of other talent processes. If you have a discussion around succession planning and you identify that somebody was not retained as a successor, it makes sense to give that feedback to the person in question so that they can take that into account into defining their actual growth plan. And all the kind of required learnings. And then it will feed into whatever is coming afterwards, which means all of your learning activities, job changes that you're planning, reward discussions. So you need to make sure that talent management as such is incorporated in the whole of all of your HR processes. Now, I would like to deep dive a little bit more on a couple of elements. And the first one is purpose. So as I said, the growth will really start with helping people identify what their purpose is. And for that, we identified a program which is called Purpose to Impact. We first started off with providing 4,000 managers with this training. So it's a 2-day training where in 2 days they really identify their own personal purpose and they write it down into a sentence. Now, I can assure you this is it sounds like a very fluffy program. And at first, when we pitched it to the management team, as you can imagine, with a lot of financial people in there, they were not that convinced at the start. But once they started to go through it, they really saw how transformative it was and how impactful it was for them. And so after 2 years now, we have 4,000 managers that went through that training. And actually, we also decided a year ago to open it up to all of our employees. So all of our employees now have the possibility to go through that program. We consciously decided to do this internally. So we identified a couple of internal people that actually give this training. And of course, we also digitized it due to COVID. And we were able to provide that kind of experience to everyone. Now, I followed a couple of them myself as well. I can assure you, I saw very bizarre things. I saw people who were working for years into this company that after those 2 days were in tears because they've actually now understood why they were not feeling happy anymore, because they understood that their purpose actually was not aligned anymore with the purpose of the company, because we changed as a company. People were angry. People were discussing. But in the end, everyone really said it was a fantastic training. And I had one of the highest satisfaction rates ever noted, in my career at least, for these kind of trainings. So our seats are filled within a week. We have an NPS score of over 88, and we're quite happy with this kind of program. And like I said, we are now opening it up to all of our employees. Now, of course, that begs the question, I can imagine, what is my purpose? And I know that question will come, so that I'm already anticipating on that question. So my purpose actually is to be the bamboo booster. It doesn't say anything to you, of course, but to me, it really speaks. Why? Because I want to make change happen. But I don't want to just make change for the change. I want to make change that sticks. So I want to make sure that there are strong roots, and that's like bamboo works. If you plant bamboo, at first you will not see anything because they're creating strong roots under the ground. But then after a couple of years, all of a sudden it sprouts up very quickly, and it takes along everybody with them, and it pushes everything aside. And you cannot get rid of bamboo anymore afterwards. If you have bamboo in your garden, you probably know what I'm talking about. So that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that there is change and that it sticks, and that people are and that people experience that change over and over again, even when I'm leaving afterwards. I also said I would come back to the individual development plan that we had and the 3 different horizons that we had, because it's a very conscious decision that we took there. So you start from the purpose, yes, but then you need to help your employees to think about the different levels of development, the different levels of growth that they are thinking about. And we actually just translated the 3 horizons of growth of McKinsey, if you know that, into the 3 horizons of growth for the employee, the individual. So we asked them consciously to first think about their plan for now, which translates to how do they increase their current craftsmanship for their current role? How do they make sure that they get better and more efficient at delivering on their current role? But we also asked them for 20% of their time to start thinking about their plan for next. What are they doing to prepare for their next role within our organization? How will they prepare themselves to be a better version of themselves and jump to the next role? But we also asked them for 5% of their time to already think about what we call a plan for beyond. What would happen if you leave the company? Are you ready? Do you have some kind of safety net? Would that happen? Because we might decide that it ends, or you might decide that it ends. Like I said, there's no lifetime employment guaranteed anymore within a bank or many other companies. And next up, based upon everything that we're discussing, is actually talent marketplaces and dynamic career pathing and things like that. So when we start collecting all that data from the employees on what they are aspiring towards, we actually are also able to start providing them with relevant information and insights on what are the possibilities, what are the next steps that you could do, what are other people with similar profiles doing actually in real time, and based upon that, what could you be doing? So we start to be very pushy and relevant in what kind of solutions we are providing them with. Moving to the second to last slide. Actually, it's also translating in development, in learning. That's also where we implemented now My Learning from IBM. So that's the Watson tool, actually. We really also want to be very relevant, very pushy into what kind of solutions are possible for them. Because, of course, there are so much opportunities out there. And people kind of get lost into all of the opportunities and then they just do nothing. So we really want to be very open in what is possible, but also as relevant as possible. And it's not only looking at content, because content is of course very important, but it's also about connecting them with people. How do we connect them with people that are actually having the same kind of experiences, or people that actually have the experiences that they could learn from, and how do we connect with them? But also connecting to opportunities. Who will we be sending to an international example? Who could be working on a gig, a project? And gigs is also something we're heavily discussing about now within the organization, to set this up as an internal marketplace for gigs, where people actually work for 5%, 10%, 20% of their time within the organization for somebody else. And everything is also coupled back to what we call the 6 capabilities. Because of course there are many skills out there. If you take a look at skills ontologies, they go up to the 200,000 skills in an ontology. So again, it's way too broad for many people. They are not able to actually focus and center. So what we try to do is to define what are the 6 capabilities, the 6 main pillars that we need to work on, and we identified that for them, and we also shared that constantly. So we have identified customer experience, data fluency, and leadership as 2 very important ones that actually might make the difference towards other competitors. And we have 3 what we call foundational capabilities: non-financial risk management, cybersecurity, and operations management, which we identified as being crucial for our survival simply. And so these 6 are constantly put forward in our training curriculum, in our communication around performance management, in succession planning, you name it. In every single HR process, these 6 are being pushed. And that's actually where we are heading towards. So if you take a look at a plan, we have a plan. We know where we want to end up, but we know that the way, the journey that we will go through will be quite different than what we expect it to be. There will be pitfalls, there will be bridges, there will be issues, tooling issues, there will be resistance from management, whatever. But you need a plan. And I think we have that plan. We are trying to push forward to, and we also know we will have to change that plan. But you can only change a plan once you have one, of course. That's what I wanted to tell you today. So thanks for listening. I don't know if there are any questions, Tom.
Thank you, Christophe. Very clear and concise presentation. I like it a lot. Yes, there's certainly some questions and we have time for that. Here's one of Robert Sullivan. Thank you, Robert, for the question. Hey, Christophe, how do you maintain this idea of personalization at scale? So personalization is nice, but you have thousands of employees. How do you do that?
Yep. So clearly, you only can do that through digitization. That's the only way you can do it, because as an HR function as well within ING, we are having less and less FTEs that are available to us because there's also cost pressure and everything. But luckily, there are lots of tools on the market that allow you to do this kind of interventions. I try to go to a lot of conferences every year, and I speak a lot with for example, startups. There are very interesting things on the market where AI algorithms are being developed to help you provide that kind of solutions. The only thing is you need to be very careful, because there are also a lot of cowboys out there that are claiming they are working with AI, but if you really start deep diving into it and try to understand what's the engine behind it, then actually it's not really AI. They're just having some kind of nice programming tool. So be careful, but really start from where you want to make a difference, and that's where you I think can scale. That's one. And secondly, it's all about change management. You need to make sure that people within your organization also buy into this. They need to be willing to identify their skills, to share their skills with the organization. People tend to be quite open to do that outside on a LinkedIn because they see the added value, but internally you get a lot of resistance because they ask you, okay, why do you need this? And then the GDPR comes up and everything. So you need to convince them, which is why we put a lot of emphasis in change management. We have what we call the MOVE campaign, which is then coupled to our tagline. Do your thing, where you say, okay, do your thing. It's also applying to you internally as an employee. You need to move. You need to start taking action. And that's why we have videos, we have decks, we have articles, we have testimonials, all kind of stuff running around, explaining to people why they need to take their career into their own hands, but also how they can do it. For example, we have a Yammer feed, of course. At a certain moment, I made a blog post where I compared what we call the IDP, so the individual development plan, and I made a blog post around the incredible delicious pancakes. And I explained how a pancake is very similar to an individual development plan, because a pancake is also something that is very individual. Your taste palette is different. Some people like them salty, some people like them sweet. Some people want big pancakes, small pancakes, thick pancakes, whatever. And so by making that comparison, people start to understand what you mean with that story. Because if you just show them standard nice graphs and models and everything, some people will understand and buy into it, but other people just don't. You need to be...
Okay. Thank you, Christophe. I want another question. Let's do one more question. One is a comment, fantastic presentation and great insights. And here Judith Pencras asked, do you see the learning culture has changed? And if yes, how?
Yeah. So learning culture is...
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. Culture is something that is very difficult to change. It takes a lot of time. So it's about the chicken or the egg. If you wait until the culture changed to start pushing new solutions and new approaches, then you will be too late. So we are bringing in new elements. Bringing in Watson was one element. We are bringing other elements as we speak in order to change that culture. Are we there yet? No, but we know what we are aiming for, and it's one of the big targets that we have for this year.
All right, that was concise and within the 1 minute. I want to thank you a lot, Christophe, and we hope to learn a lot more from you in the future. Take care. And hopefully you will be able to go into your office one of these days.
Okay.
All right. So where are you? You are in the red stream in the HR Agility Day. You are free to move to the blue stream, of course, but I would recommend you to stay here because we have some fantastic